Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and we're going to be talking about chapters 7 and 8, when the consequences of creating a monster finally begin to haunt Victor Frankenstein. But before we do, I want to thank all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting me and for helping me to create videos like this one. And if you haven't checked out my Patreon page yet, I recommend you head over there and see what there is to see. Not only can you support me in creating videos like this, but there's also lots of great resources, including guided questions to books like Frankenstein and others. When we last left Victor Frankenstein, he was having a walking tour with Henry Clerval, and he was finally being restored to his health and vitality and spirits from before. Here he is, and he is finally in communion with one of his fellow creatures. He has gotten close to his good friend again, and that has drawn him back from the darkness that had haunted him when he was all alone. We see over and over and over again in this book the danger of being alone and not having a friend to guide you and to shore you up in your weaknesses. But Victor's already made a big mistake. He created that creature and then he completely neglected and abandoned it and let it wander off on its own. And now some of the consequences finally begin to show up. Just as he gets back from his walking tour, he finds that he has a letter from his father. And this seems like good news because, after all, he was waiting for the moment when it was time for him to return home. But the letter is full of very, very bad news. His youngest brother, William, has been murdered. They all apparently went out for a walk, and the younger brother was missing for some time, and they finally found his body, and it looks as though he's been strangled to death. Victor is, of course, completely heartbroken over the death of his brother, and he immediately prepares to return home to be with his family and try to comfort them. Clerval tries to comfort him a little bit and sends him on his way, and he begins his journey home. However, on his way home, his changeability, his moodiness, causes him to stop and wait for a few days in the city of Lausanne. As we've already noticed in this romantic novel, he is incredibly moody and will have these changes of mood from time to time. He describes this change this time in this way. My journey was very melancholy. At first, I wished to hurry on, for I longed to console and sympathize with my loved and sorrowing friends. But when I drew near my native town, I slackened my progress. I could hardly sustain the multitude of feelings that crowded into my mind. I passed through scenes familiar to my youth, but which I had not seen for nearly 6 years. How altered everything might be during that time. One sudden and desolating change had taken place, but 1,000 little circumstances might have by degrees worked other alterations, which, although they were done more tranquilly, might not be the less decisive. Fear overcame me. I dared not advance, dreading 1,000 nameless evils that made me tremble, although I was unable to define them. I remained 2 days at Lausanne in this painful state of mind. And so he's overcome by fear, and fear leading to inaction, which is clearly a problem with Victor, and it's going to be not the last time he has one of these issues. However, the peaceful lake and the beauty of nature calm him, and he finally begins to return home. However, as he arrives in Geneva, he arrives too late to enter the town. The gate is already shut, and so he begins to just walk around outside. A tempest brews up, this big storm, and as he watches the lightning flash over the mountains, he feels as though it is this funeral dirge for his brother, and he's watching all of this intense and powerful nature with all of his emotions. Again, very, very romantic. But all of a sudden, in the midst of this moment, the lightning flash reveals this huge and terrifying figure standing there nearby. A flash of lightning illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me, its gigantic stature, and the deformity of its aspect, more hideous than belongs to humanity, instantly informed me that it was the wretch, the filthy demon to whom I had given life. What did he there? Could he be, I shuddered at the conception, the murderer of my brother? No sooner did the idea cross my imagination than I became convinced of its truth. My teeth chattered, and I was forced to lean against a tree for support. The figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed that fair child. He was the murderer. I could not doubt it. The mere presence of the idea was irresistible proof of the fact. I thought of pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for another flash discovered him to me hanging among the rocks of the nearly perpendicular ascent of Mont Saleve, a hill that bounds Plainpalais to the south. He soon reached the summit and disappeared. So Victor sees his creature, and this is the first time he's encountered him in a very long time, since its creation. And there it is, moving through the storm in the middle of the night, and at a quick glimpse, he sees that the thing just leap up the side of a mountain in a kind of a terrifying way. How does Victor respond to this? Well, as we just read, immediately he blames the creature for his brother's death. It couldn't have been a human that killed my brother. No, it was this creature, this monster, this terrifying thing. And so now Victor has this realization. He finally recognizes his role in the creation of this thing. He's forgotten about it. He just let it go out of his mind. And now he remembers his creature. And now it comes back to haunt him. And he says, okay, I've created this thing. And this thing has apparently killed his little brother. That guilt is now on Victor's shoulders. He feels the weight of it. We've noticed how throughout this book, and how he will continue to, avoid responsibility for his actions, or just kind of stew, rather than actually taking action and responding to the things that he's caused. Here, Victor has this moment of clarity that he created this creature is now doing bad things, and that is part of his responsibility. However, Victor doesn't go try to resolve this problem. Again, he tries to just quiet it down. He decides not to confess and talk about this with anyone because, after all, he just came out of a long mental breakdown and fever fit, and people will perhaps just chalk up what he says to his mental breakdown. And also, even if he could convince anyone that there's this gigantic man running around murdering people, how are they going to stop it? It's huge, and he just watched it dance up the side of a mountain in no time. So there's no human being that could pursue that could catch that. So maybe he should just pretend it didn't happen again. Ah, Victor, you're so frustrating. It gets worse when he finally gets home and he comes into his house and there's his family and he sees them all again. But the first thing that his brother mentions is that they have figured out who the murderer was. Now, Victor knows exactly who the murderer was, and so he's shocked by this. How'd you figure that out? Wild. But it turns out that they've all just accused sweet, innocent little Justine Moritz. Remember her, the character who showed up in Elizabeth's letter, whose long backstory was dropped for us for no apparent reason? Oh, now we know why. Justine is just about to be tried for the murder of William Frankenstein. She was the last person with him, and she was missing during that window when he was killed. And she came back and acted really strange and erratic when she got home. Victor is very upset by this because clearly it wasn't Justine. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It was his monster. But he decides to just go along to the trial because, after all, it's the justice system, and that always gets everything right? It never fails. Justice system always, yeah. He just assumes that justice will happen, and he doesn't have to lift a finger to try to present anything that he knows. Well, the trial does not go as expected. It goes rather badly for Justine. Not only is there the circumstantial evidence of her absence during that time and her strange behavior, but she also has a locket that the boy had been wearing that day. Elizabeth had allowed him to wear this locket with this beautiful picture of his mother in it, and it was a very valuable necklace. And after his death, it was missing, so people assumed that he was murdered in order to get the necklace away from him. And when it shows up in Justine's clothes, well, there's motive right there. Elizabeth still believes in the innocence of Justine, and she witnesses at the trial and gives a testimonial of her character, but it doesn't do any good. Everyone sees how sweet Elizabeth is, but that only makes them more angry at Justine for being so black-hearted to hurt a family with such good, sweet people in it. Victor, on the other hand, contributes nothing at the trial. Nothing. He does nothing. He watches the whole thing and gets really upset, because after all, he knows who killed William. But again, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't even try. Sure, he has his excuses, but He's just going to let this young innocent girl go to her death.
So here's a suggestion for you, Victor. I know you don't want to tell your whole story because you're too scared, but couldn't you just casually point out to the jury that, as a scientist, the grip strength of a teenage girl is probably a little different from that of an 8-foot monster, and surely any medical examiner could see that on the boy's neck?
The jury holds her responsible, and she is sentenced to execution. And this is hard enough, but Justine then confesses. And that even shakes the confidence of Elizabeth. Not Victor. Victor knows she's innocent. He knows who's really responsible. But Elizabeth is shaken for a bit. And Elizabeth goes to the jail to speak with Justine and ask her why she confessed. Justine then admits it was all a lie. She confessed so that the priest would give her absolution, because the priests were telling her that she was going to burn in hell unless she confessed. Of course, she didn't do it, so the confession was a lie, and that actually strikes her conscience more than anything else she's done. Elizabeth and Victor are heartbroken for her, but Justine is going to go to her death, at least knowing that she's innocent, and also that the people who were most hurt by this believe her. And that gives her something to hold on to as she is executed for a crime she had no part of. Elizabeth, of course, is very emotional in all of this, but the worst is Victor. Because again, he knows, but he's not doing anything about it. And that sure demonstrates a darkness in Victor. We've seen it all the way through. The kind of guy who could create something and then just abandon it is also somebody who is not willing to stand up and speak when an innocent person is slaughtered. And the question that is often asked in this book is, who is the real monster? Is it that creature in the darkness, or is it Victor himself? And what good does Victor's wallowing in his own guilt do if he's not actually going to take any responsibility? We'll see what comes of Victor's wallowing in the next couple of chapters. Thanks for watching. You can click to subscribe or follow the link to my Patreon page where you can find other great resources. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.